Black girl dragged out like a criminal. Then her billionaire father lands a helicopter. It was supposed to be a simple flight, just 3 hours from Atlanta to Denver. Nothing complicated, nothing dramatic. Kennedy Price, a 17-year-old black girl with big curls pulled into a puff and a bright glimmer of excitement in her eyes, had been counting down the days to this trip. She wore a clean white hoodie, jeans and sneakers, a crossbody bag with a small embroidered K slung over her shoulder. This wasn't her first time flying alone, but it was her first time flying first class. Her father, Darius Price, had surprised her with the ticket the night before as an early birthday gift. "You've been working hard, baby girl. Honor roll 3 years in a row. You deserve a view from the front of the plane," he'd said with a grin. What he didn't mention, though, was that Darius Price wasn't just a generous dad. He was a billionaire tech mogul and the founder of Aerolift, a global aviation and logistics company that quietly owned more than a dozen subsidiaries, including the very airline Kennedy was flying with, Altura Air. But Kennedy didn't carry that name like a crown. She never liked making a scene or announcing who her father was unless she absolutely had to. She wanted people to treat her like everyone else, not some VIP with a golden last name. That morning at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the sky was gray, but her mood was sunny. Kennedy moved through security with ease, offering smiles to TSA agents and flight staff. She even helped a flustered older woman in front of her find her gate on the terminal screen. The small kindnesses were part of who she was, instilled in her by a father who never forgot his roots. Gate B29 buzzed with activity. As Kennedy approached the check-in, she noticed the gate agent glance at her, then double-take. He was a tall white man in his mid-40s, with slicked back hair and a rigid posture that made his Altura Air uniform look like a police outfit. His name tag read, Todd Brennan. "Hi, I'm on Flight 721 to Denver," Kennedy said, offering her boarding pass. Todd didn't take it right away. His eyes swept her from head to toe, pausing at her sneakers. His tone was clipped. "Are you sure you're in the right line? This is first class." Kennedy held her smile, though it dimmed slightly. "Yes, sir, that's me. Seat 1C. Todd snatched the boarding pass and scanned it without a word. The scanner beeped green, but his lips didn't move. No welcome. No gesture toward the jet bridge. Just a silent nod and a look that seemed to say, "You better behave." Kennedy stepped past him, unsettled but trying to brush it off. Maybe he was just having a bad day. Maybe he was like a lot of people she'd encountered before, thinking first class had a specific look, and she didn't match it. Once aboard, she was greeted by a young flight attendant named Kara, who smiled and showed her to her seat. "Welcome aboard, Miss Price," she said politely. Kennedy settled in, plugging in her headphones and pulling out her iPad. She was planning to rewatch her favorite nature documentary before the snack cart rolled around. She texted her dad, "Boarded. So far, so good." But something felt off. Kara walked by again and asked if she needed anything. Kennedy asked for a bottle of water. Kara returned with one, but her smile seemed more forced this time, like she had been told to watch Kennedy. A few rows back, a man in a navy blazer kept glancing toward her. Kennedy wasn't paranoid. She knew when she was being watched. She thought of texting her dad again, but she didn't want to make a big deal. 20 minutes into the flight, as the aircraft leveled out and the seatbelt signs dimmed, Kara returned, but this time with another flight attendant and the same gate agent from earlier, Todd Brennan, now inexplicably on board. Kennedy looked up in confusion. "Is everything okay?" Todd didn't answer. The other attendant, a thin woman in her 30s with cold eyes named Meredith, leaned in. "Miss Price, we're going to need to verify your ticket." Kennedy blinked. "Excuse me." "You already scanned it. I'm in 1C. Meredith's voice turned rigid. We've had a security alert regarding fraudulent first-class bookings. Please show us your ID and boarding documents. Kennedy fumbled for her small wallet and handed them over. Her voice was steady, but her heart pounded. I don't understand. What's the problem? Todd took the documents and examined them far longer than necessary. This ticket was purchased under the name D. Price. Is that your father? Yes. He booked it for me. I'm a minor. Do you have a consent form or proof of your relation to the purchaser? Kennedy narrowed her eyes. That's not required. I'm 17, flying alone, and this isn't my first flight. Why are you doing this? Todd ignored her tone. Please gather your belongings. We'll need to speak with you at the front of the plane. Are you seriously pulling me out of my seat? In front of everyone? Passengers began to stir. The man in 1A looked over, raising a brow. The woman behind Kennedy leaned forward, visibly uncomfortable. I haven't done anything wrong, Kennedy said louder. Meredith reached for her arm, and Kennedy jerked back. Don't touch me. You're refusing to comply, Todd announced, loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. Kennedy stood up, trembling with rage. I'm not refusing. I'm asking why I'm being treated like this. You're causing a scene. No, you are. That's when Todd made the call. We need assistance with a non-compliant passenger, he said into his walkie, even though Kennedy hadn't even raised her voice. Moments later, 2 uniformed air marshals approached from the front galley. Kennedy's eyes widened. What are you doing? One of them took her by the arm. Ma'am, we need you to step off this flight. Passengers gasped. She's just a kid, someone said. This is outrageous, another muttered. Kennedy tried to remain calm. Please, just let me call my dad. He can fix this. You're making a mistake. But they weren't listening. Her arms were held as they marched her down the aisle, her bag dangling from her shoulder, passengers staring in disbelief. One woman pulled out her phone and began filming. Kennedy's heart broke in silence, dragged out like a criminal, with no chance to explain, no chance to defend herself. And in that moment, all she could think was, Dad, I need you now. She didn't know it yet, but her father had just received the text, and in less than an hour, the roar of rotors over Denver would shake the tarmac. Kennedy sat in a cold, windowless security room inside Denver International Airport. Her hoodie, once comfortable, now clung to her like a weight. Her wrists still tingled from where the air marshals had gripped her too tightly. She hadn't been handcuffed, thank God, but the way they'd treated her, it might as well have been. 2 men in uniform stood near the door, arms crossed, as if guarding a dangerous suspect. The humiliation burned hotter than any bruise. The room smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. A large metal desk sat in the middle, and behind it, a woman with a headset typed something into a terminal. Her name tag read, Officer H. Mathers. She hadn't said much since Kennedy was brought in, except to ask her name, age, and whether she had any weapons on her. Her voice was flat, clinical, void of empathy. Kennedy sat in silence, holding her phone tightly in her lap. Her screen was locked, but her dad's last text was burned into her mind. I'm on it. Sit tight. How tight could she sit when she'd just been dragged off a plane in front of 24 people who now probably thought she'd done something wrong? The door creaked open. A new man entered, bald, heavy-set, in a Navy Altura air blazer. He moved with the tired arrogance of someone used to throwing his weight around. Miss Price, he said, taking a seat across from her without waiting for acknowledgement. I'm Kenneth Doyle, Director of Passenger Relations for Altura. I understand there's been some confusion. Kennedy didn't answer. He clasped his hands on the table and gave her a rehearsed smile. Now, I want you to understand this is not personal. We have protocols. When discrepancies arise, especially involving underage passengers and third-party ticket purchases, we have to investigate. There was no discrepancy, Kennedy said quietly, her voice cracking. I gave you everything. My boarding pass, my ID. My name was on the list. Well, Doyle said, tapping a pen on the table, your ticket was purchased with a corporate account under the name D. Price. Our system flagged it as potentially unauthorized. That's why Mr. Brennan, our gate agent, escalated the issue. Kennedy looked him in the eye. So you think I hacked into an airline account and gifted myself a first-class ticket? Doyle's smile faded a little. It's not about what we think. It's about following procedure. No, it's about assuming I didn't belong up there, she snapped. Because I'm black. Because I'm young. Because I wasn't wearing a blazer and pearls. Doyle's jaw tightened. I understand you're upset, but let's not turn this into something it's not. Kennedy leaned forward. You turned it into what it is the second you treated me like a criminal. There was a tense silence. The typing behind the desk stopped. Even Officer Mathers looked up for a moment. Doyle sighed. Look, we're trying to resolve this. If you just provide some verification of your relationship with Mr. Price, we can clear this all up. Do you have any written consent from him? Any contact information? Kennedy's hands shook as she unlocked her phone. I texted him before boarding. I told him everything. He's probably already called your corporate office. Doyle gave her a patronizing smile. We haven't received anything official yet, but feel free to make the call. She stood up, phone to her ear. The ringtone buzzed in the small room, bouncing off the walls like a countdown. 1 ring. 2. Then her father's voice came through, low and clipped. Kennedy, are you safe? Her voice wobbled. I'm in a holding room. They said my ticket was flagged. They pulled me off the plane, Dad. In front of everyone. There was a long silence. Then, steel. I'm here. What? I'm here, Kennedy. On the ground. I landed 10 minutes ago. Kennedy's eyes widened. Wait, you're in Denver? No, he said. I'm on the tarmac. She froze. You what? I landed my chopper next to your gate. I'm walking toward Terminal C as we speak. Kennedy slowly lowered the phone. The entire room stared at her. Outside, through a small barred window near the ceiling, the unmistakable chop of helicopter blades began to rattle the glass. Then the PA system buzzed overhead. Attention! For all staff in Terminal C, please clear Gate 17. Emergency landing authorization has been confirmed by Aerolift Executive Directive. Officer Mathers stood up, her face paling. What the hell is going on? Kennedy smiled for the first time that day. My dad's here. Doyle pushed back his chair, uneasy. Excuse me, what exactly is your father's full name? She looked him square in the face. Darius Price. Doyle blinked. The Darius Price? Kennedy nodded. The one who signs your checks. A moment later, the security door flung open, and in strode Darius Price, 6'3", broad-shouldered, dressed in a black trench coat and pressed slacks, his tie flapping slightly from the helicopter wind that still gusted through the open jet bridge behind him. His expression was thunderous. Kennedy ran to him. He wrapped his arms around her protectively and then turned to face the room. Who laid hands on my daughter? His voice was low, deadly calm. No one answered. He stepped toward Doyle. I want names. I want footage. I want a full report by noon. Doyle stumbled over his words. Mr. Price, I wasn't aware. You dragged a teenage girl off a plane because of a last name and a hoodie. Kennedy clung to her father's arm as security scattered and Doyle stammered out excuses. Darius handed Kennedy his phone. "Get some air. Call your mom." "I'll handle this." As she stepped outside, Kennedy saw passengers gathered by the glass windows, staring at the black helicopter on the tarmac. Its blade still spinning, its presence loud and undeniable. Phones were out. Pictures were being taken. She could already see hashtags forming in her head. And somewhere deep down, a fire began to rise. Not just to clear her name, but to make sure no one else went through what she had. The billionaire's daughter wasn't hiding anymore. The buzz around Terminal C was electric. Whispers rippled through the airport like wildfire. People craned their necks, trying to catch a glimpse of the man who just landed a helicopter on restricted ground. Security guards were on edge. Employees stood frozen behind desks, their eyes darting between their supervisors and the jet bridge. Even seasoned flyers clutched their phones, capturing every second. Kennedy sat quietly in a corner of the executive lounge, her hands still shaking. She tried to collect her thoughts, but the image of being dragged from her seat and accused like a criminal kept flashing through her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the gate agent scowl, heard Sandra's clipped tone, felt the firm grip on her arm. Across from her, a kind-faced attendant named Elise handed her a cup of peppermint tea. "It helps with the nerves," she offered softly. Kennedy gave her a tired smile. "Thank you." Before Elise could respond, the lounge doors opened with a soft hiss, and in walked Darius Price, flanked by 3 corporate security officers. His expression was unreadable, but his presence silenced the room. He crossed the floor in long strides and sat down beside his daughter. "You all right?" Kennedy nodded, but her voice was tight. "I think so. I don't really know." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "No cameras in here, you can say it." She blinked, then exhaled. "I'm angry, Dad. I'm humiliated, and I don't understand how this keeps happening." Darius's jaw clenched. "It shouldn't have." "Not to you, not to anyone, especially not under my company's roof." Kennedy looked at him. "Wait, your company?" Darius sighed, rubbing his temple. "I'm not just a stakeholder anymore. I finalized the majority buyout of Altura Air last month." "I wanted to surprise you. We were going to do the announcement in 2 days." Her mouth fell open. "You own Altura?" He nodded. "Now I do." A sharp silence followed. Kennedy shook her head slowly, trying to process. "So, they roughed up the owner's daughter. On his airline, with his name on the boardroom." "Yeah," Darius said grimly. "And the footage is everywhere." "Corporate is panicking, legal's on standby, and I just got word that 2 board members have already called an emergency vote to remove the VP of operations." Kennedy's eyes widened. "That fast?" Darius looked over at her. "They know what this means. This isn't just about a PR disaster. It's a systemic failure, and they got caught on tape." As if on cue, Elise returned with a tablet, her face pale. "Sir, there's a live stream trending. Dragged like a criminal has hit over 2 million views in the last hour." Kennedy blinked. 2 million? Elise nodded. "It's everywhere. News outlets are already reaching out for statements. CNN, MSNBC, even some international press." Darius took the tablet, watched a clip of his daughter being escorted from the plane, her arm gripped tightly, her face a mix of fear and confusion. His lips tightened into a line. "They've lit a match under the wrong storm." Just then, a call buzzed on Darius's phone. He glanced down. "It's the head of PR. I have to take this." "Stay here, okay?" Kennedy nodded, But the second he left, she found herself spiraling again. Alone with her thoughts, she began to question everything. Why hadn't she just told them who her father was right away? Why did she try to prove herself with facts and ID and decency instead of using the one thing that would have stopped it all? But that wasn't who she wanted to be. She didn't want to be the girl who only got justice because of who her dad was. She wanted to matter on her own. Suddenly, the lounge door opened again, and a familiar face stepped in. The lawyer from the flight, Greg Masters, she remembered now, carrying a leather briefcase and a look of determination. "You must be Kennedy," he said, offering his hand. "Greg Masters. We shared row 2 on the plane." "I remember," Kennedy said, standing. "Thank you for what you said back there." He smiled faintly. "You didn't deserve that treatment. No one does." "Listen, I spoke with your father briefly. I want to offer my services, pro bono if necessary. You've got a solid civil rights case, not to mention grounds for public defamation, unlawful detainment, and racial profiling." Kennedy blinked. "That's a lot," he nodded. "It is, but you're not alone. People are furious, and not just because it was caught on video. They're furious because it happens all the time, just not always to someone who can fight back." She sank back into the couch. "I don't know what I want yet. I'm still trying to breathe." Greg's tone softened. "Of course. But know this. You don't just have the power to fight for yourself. You have the power to set a precedent." Before she could respond, her phone vibrated. A text from Monica, her best friend. "Girl, you're on the news." "Like, everywhere. Call me." Kennedy's heart pounded. She looked up at Greg. "What if I'm not ready to be a symbol?" He leaned back in his chair. "Then don't be. Just be a voice that tells the truth." Kennedy sat in silence, the weight of everything bearing down. But somewhere inside her, something had shifted. She wasn't just a teenager anymore. She wasn't just someone's daughter. She was a spark. And now, the world was watching to see what she would do with the fire. The following morning, Kennedy awoke to the soft chime of her phone vibrating on the nightstand beside her. For a moment, she hoped it had all been a terrible dream. That she'd simply flown to New York, taken her seat like everyone else, and landed without incident. But reality hit her fast. The hotel suite was too pristine, too quiet. She hadn't unpacked. Her bag sat untouched in the corner. The bruise on her arm was a dull throb, and her phone screen was still stacked with missed calls and unread messages. Monica's latest text hovered at the top. "You made the front page of the Times. Want me to bring donuts?" Kennedy smiled faintly, then tapped into her browser. There it was. Her name, her photo, her story, splashed across headlines. News anchors dissected every frame of the footage. Analysts discussed racial profiling in aviation. Hashtags like Jaka Justice for Kennedy and Yaka Airline Accountability trended globally. And in the center of it all, her. Downstairs in the hotel's executive lounge, Darius was already pacing when she arrived. He wore a crisp charcoal suit, but his eyes were tired, his jaw clenched. "We have a situation," he said without greeting. "Reynolds is doubling down." Kennedy blinked. "Wait, what?" "He's claiming you were disruptive, refused to comply, and that he acted in accordance with airline safety protocols." Her blood ran cold. "He's lying." Darius nodded grimly. "Of course he is. But the problem is, a few board members are nervous. They think disciplining him too quickly will look like favoritism, since you're my daughter." Kennedy scoffed. "Favoritism? He assaulted me." "I know," Darius said, lowering his voice. "But you need to understand, corporate boards don't move on truth, they move on risk." She clenched her fists. So what? He gets to smear me, and they just debate it in conference rooms? No, Darius replied. Because we're not waiting around. We're going public. She froze. We? He handed her a printed statement, already drafted. I'm holding a press conference this afternoon. I'll announce a zero-tolerance policy on discrimination within Altura Air and call for a full internal audit of flight staff behavior. You don't have to be there, but I want to give you the option. Kennedy stared at the paper. If I show up, the story changes. It's no longer just about what they did. It's about who I am. Darius nodded slowly. That's the weight, Kennedy. You don't have to carry it, but if you choose to, it will mean something. She glanced out the window, the city buzzing below. She thought of every time someone had doubted her, looked past her, spoken over her. And she thought about the passengers on that plane, the ones who stood up, the ones who filmed, the ones who stayed silent. I want to speak, she said softly. Her father looked at her, surprise flickering. You sure? Kennedy's voice didn't waver. Let them see me. Let them hear me. Later that afternoon, the media swarmed the makeshift podium outside Altura's corporate headquarters. Dozens of microphones, camera crews from every major network. Darius stood tall beside his daughter, his hand resting on her shoulder before he stepped back. Kennedy took the podium. I was just a passenger, she began, steady but sincere. A 17-year-old girl flying home. I didn't expect special treatment. I didn't expect a red carpet. I expected to be treated like a person. The crowd hushed. Even the cameramen stilled. I wasn't, she continued. Instead, I was accused, doubted, manhandled, and humiliated. And not because of my actions, but because of assumptions about who I could be. She paused, letting it sink in. What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern too many people live with quietly, without cameras, without headlines. But it's real. And it needs to end. Her voice wavered slightly, but she pushed through. I'm speaking today not just because I'm the daughter of a man with power, but because I want to make sure the next black girl who steps onto a plane doesn't have to prove she belongs in her seat. The crowd erupted. Journalists shouted questions. Flashes popped. Darius stepped forward, guiding her off the podium as security created a path to the car. Inside the black SUV, silence hung heavy. You were brilliant, Darius finally said. Kennedy leaned her head against the window, watching the crowds fade. I'm still shaking. He smiled. That means you care. That's a good thing. But the moment was short-lived. His phone rang and his smile faded. What is it? He answered sharply. Kennedy watched his expression shift. Cold. Then tight. He hung up. Reynolds filed a counter-complaint. He's threatening to sue the company. And you. Kennedy blinked. What? He claims you defamed him during the press conference, says his reputation is ruined. Her hands balled into fists. He ruined it himself. I know, Darius said, but he's not going quietly. Kennedy stared out the window. Then neither will I. Kennedy stood by the hotel room window, watching the clouds gather over Manhattan. Her phone buzzed again, a notification from a news outlet, then another. The headlines were flooding in, fast and relentless. What she had said at the press conference was echoing far beyond what she imagined. But so was the backlash. Some comments praised her bravery. Others accused her of playing the victim card. And a vocal few, mostly anonymous accounts online, were already labeling her a spoiled billionaire's kid craving attention. She tossed the phone on the bed, biting her lip. Don't read the comments, Monica said, entering the room with 2 coffees. I mean, seriously, that's like step 1 of surviving the internet. I didn't expect it to blow up like this, Kennedy muttered, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. I thought, I don't know, that people would just understand. They do, Monica said, sitting beside her. The ones who matter do. A knock on the door interrupted the moment. Kennedy stiffened. Monica walked over and peeked through the peephole. It's your dad. Darius entered, face grave. He held a file in one hand and his phone in the other. Reynolds is suing, he said flatly. He's filed a defamation suit, claims your speech at the press conference was slanderous and that you fabricated parts of the story. Kennedy blinked. What? He assaulted me. That's on video. He's arguing that the video only shows parts of what happened and that it was edited to make him look bad. She stood up. He looked bad because he was bad. Darius sighed. I know that, but legally, he's trying to make this about corporate retaliation. He says he's being scapegoated for a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Kennedy's voice cracked. They dragged me, out of my seat. In front of a plane full of people. Monica looked at Darius. Can't you shut this down? You're the CEO. That's the thing, he said, pinching the bridge of his nose. I can't be seen interfering with an open legal process. It has to be handled the right way by the legal team. But I did approve something that might help. He opened the folder and handed Kennedy a stack of printouts. What's this? She asked, flipping through them. Complaints, Darius said. Old ones. From other passengers, about Reynolds, about Sandra. Some are recent, some go back years, they were buried. Not escalated, but they exist. Kennedy's eyes scanned the pages. Rude conduct. Hostile behavior. Racial profiling. In each case, Reynolds had managed to avoid consequences, often by blaming others or citing protocol. Why hasn't this come out before? She asked. Because no one ever pushed hard enough, Darius replied. Until now. A spark of resolve lit in Kennedy's chest. She looked up. Then let's push harder. Later that evening, Kennedy sat down with a journalist from the Ledger, one of the few national outlets known for deep investigations and not chasing clicks. The interview was off camera, just a voice recorder and a notepad. Kennedy didn't want theatrics. She wanted truth. He made me feel like I was nothing, she said, voice steady. Like I didn't belong in my seat, on that flight, in that space. The journalist nodded. Did you feel unsafe? Yes, Kennedy said quietly, and humiliated. But worse than that, I felt invisible, like my words didn't matter, like I could scream and no one would listen. And what changed? Kennedy looked up, her gaze sharp. I stopped waiting to be listened to. I started speaking louder. The article published 2 days later. It wasn't just another headline. It was a 10-page exposé, the pattern of power at 30,000 feet. It included testimony from former employees, quotes from passengers, and internal memos that revealed Reynolds had been warned more than once. Within hours, the board at Altura Air called an emergency meeting. Darius wasn't just attending, he was demanding action. When he walked into the glass conference room, the tension was thick. Some members tried to appear neutral, others seemed visibly uneasy. We failed, Darius said without preamble. Not just as a company, but as people. We let this happen. Darius, one board member said cautiously. I understand you're emotional, but... No, Darius cut in. I'm not being emotional. I'm being accountable. Another member leaned forward. If we fire Reynolds now, it could look like we're caving to media pressure. That's risky. What's riskier? Darius said, voice like ice, is protecting a man with a documented history of abuse, ignoring the damage done to a young girl, and pretending our brand can survive that kind of rot. A heavy silence followed. Then the vote was called. Unanimous. Reynolds was to be terminated immediately. Sandra, too, but Darius wasn't done. I want a public apology issued on every flight, from every gate. I want mandatory retraining rolled out in the next 60 days. And I want every complaint reviewed by an independent ethics board. He looked around the room. If you're not ready to stand behind that, you shouldn't be sitting in those chairs. Back at the hotel, Kennedy got the call. It was over. Reynolds had been fired. His lawsuit was now under review, but with the new evidence, it was likely to collapse. Sandra had quietly resigned. For the first time in days, Kennedy let herself exhale fully. She walked to the window, staring out over the city, her reflection faint in the glass. This wasn't the end. But it was a turning point, and she wasn't invisible anymore. Kennedy hadn't slept more than 3 hours since the board meeting. Even though Reynolds had been fired and Sandra was gone, a different kind of fire had just started. The news cycle was now relentless. Headlines morphed from her personal story into a larger national conversation. Racial profiling in luxury spaces, systemic abuse in aviation, and privilege as a double-edged sword. And Kennedy, whether she liked it or not, was at the center. Monica paced their hotel suite, reading tweets out loud. Listen to this one. She's only getting justice because her dad's a billionaire. What about the rest of us who've been mistreated and ignored? Kennedy shut her laptop. They're right. Monica froze. Wait, what? They're right, Kennedy repeated, calmer now. I had a parachute. Most people don't. I had a father who could land a helicopter. Most people are dragged out and forgotten. But you didn't ask to be famous. No, but I am now, so I better do something with it. Monica blinked. You're not thinking of going public again, are you? Kennedy nodded. Bigger this time. I want to speak for everyone who doesn't have someone to speak for them. At that exact moment, her phone rang. It was a New York civil rights attorney, Ava Granger. Kennedy put the call on speaker. You don't know me, Ava said, but I've been following your story closely. I represent a group of former Altura Air employees who were fired or silenced after reporting similar abuses by Reynolds. They want to come forward. Kennedy leaned in. But they're scared. This man buried complaints for years. Some of them signed NDAs. Others were warned they'd never work in the industry again. Kennedy sat up straighter. Let me talk to them. Ava hesitated. They won't go public, but maybe they'll meet with you if I set it up. Off the record. 3 hours later, Kennedy and Monica walked into the back room of a quiet Harlem cafe. Waiting inside were 5 people, all different ages, genders, and backgrounds. A flight attendant named Miguel. A gate agent named Patrice. A junior pilot named Jordan. A former PR intern. And an elderly former employee named Gerald who had worked with Reynolds when he was just starting out. They all carried stories. And pain. Reynolds once told me, Miguel began, that passengers with certain profiles should be treated with extra caution. I knew what he meant. I told HR. 2 weeks later, my schedule was cut in half. Patrice added, he used to joke about which passengers didn't belong in first class. One time, I pushed back. He laughed and said, you're welcome to go work at Spirit if you want to be woke. The intern pulled out a folder. These are emails. He used corporate lingo to hide the profiling. Passenger alignment concerns. Behavioral risk flag. It was all code. Gerald cleared his throat. I trained Reynolds. I saw the way he rose through the ranks. He was good at flying. But even better at politics, he knew how to cover his tracks, and he thought he was untouchable. Kennedy sat in stunned silence, absorbing it all. "This," she said finally, "this can't just be my story anymore. It's all of ours." That night, back at the hotel, Kennedy called her father. "Dad," she said, "you still know the head of programming at WBN News, right?" Darius's voice sharpened. "Why?" "I want to do a live special, not just about me, about all of this." "All of them." He hesitated. "That's risky. People are looking to tear you down." "They'll twist anything you say." "Let them try," she replied. "I'm not scared anymore." He exhaled slowly. "All right. I'll make the call." The following week, the WBN News primetime special aired. Titled "The Flight We Never Boarded," it featured Kennedy, Ava Granger, and the 5 whistleblowers, faces blurred, voices distorted. But their words rang clear and loud. Midway through the segment, the anchor turned to Kennedy. "You had power, a father who could make noise, but most people don't. What do you say to those who think this is just a billionaire's daughter trying to be a hero?" Kennedy didn't flinch. "I say this isn't about me," she said. "It's about what happens when people with power stay silent. It's about listening to those who've been screaming into the void for years. If my name opens doors, then I'll hold them open for as many people as I can." The clip went viral within hours. Major celebrities reposted it. Airline unions reached out to Ava Granger, and most importantly, Congress took notice. Senator Maxine Shaw, chair of the Transportation Ethics Committee, issued a public statement calling for a federal hearing into passenger profiling and labor discrimination in commercial aviation. But as momentum built, so did the threats. The next morning, a brick was thrown through the hotel's lobby window. Inside the envelope attached to it was a note. "You don't know what you're waking up. Walk away, or we'll make you." Monica's hands shook as she read it. Darius immediately doubled Kennedy's security, but Kennedy? She only grew more focused. "They're scared," she said quietly. "That means we're getting close." And for the first time in her life, she knew what it meant to fight not just for herself, but for something bigger. Rain drummed steadily on the windows of the penthouse as Kennedy stood watching the city flicker with lights. The brick through the window had shaken Monica. Her father had gone into protective overdrive. But Kennedy. She couldn't afford fear, not anymore. That morning, she received an encrypted file from Ava Granger. It had no name attached, just a simple message. "You'll want to see this." Kennedy opened the file, her pulse quickening. It was a series of leaked internal emails from Altura Air executives. Emails that revealed they'd known about Reynolds' misconduct for years, but protected him because he was a key image of traditional leadership. The most damning one was from a now-retired VP, stating explicitly that certain passengers don't reflect the Altura brand image of elite clientele. Her fingers froze on the mouse. This wasn't just about one man. It was a culture. Kennedy called Ava immediately. "Where did this come from?" she demanded. "I can't tell you that," Ava replied, "but let's just say someone inside has finally had enough. This isn't just policy negligence. This could implicate the board. There's talk of perjury, destruction of evidence. We have to take this public. There's a hearing scheduled in 2 weeks. The Senate wants your testimony." Kennedy's throat tightened. "I'm in." Meanwhile, across town, the Altura Air legal team was scrambling. They'd underestimated the storm Kennedy Langford had unleashed. And in a quiet office, a man named Paul Wentworth, the same board member who had once tried to dismiss Darius's concerns, made a call. "She's going to testify," he said flatly. If those emails go public, we're not just looking at PR damage. We're talking indictments. Then stop her, the voice on the other end growled. Leak something, dig into her past, anything. Discredit her. She's clean, Paul hissed. The girl's a literal valedictorian who spent her summers volunteering in Kenya. You're going to make a martyr. Then we make the father the villain. The plan was set. The next morning, news broke on a fringe tabloid site. Exclusive. Billionaire Darius Langford under federal scrutiny for insider trading. It was flimsy, unverified, and riddled with anonymous sources, but it spread like wildfire. Kennedy's phone rang nonstop. Is it true? Monica asked breathlessly. No, it's garbage, Kennedy said, pacing the floor. But that's not the point. They're trying to shift the spotlight, make me the daughter of a criminal so no one listens to what I say. Darius arrived later that day, visibly furious. I've worked my entire career to stay clean, he snapped. They think they can play dirty because I refuse to cover for them. So we play smarter, Kennedy said. We don't get dragged into defending lies. We keep pushing the truth. Darius shook his head slowly. This isn't a game, Kennedy. These people don't care about rules. If you testify, they'll come at you harder. She didn't flinch. Let them. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make change. 2 nights before the Senate hearing, Kennedy was invited to speak at a student town hall at NYU. The auditorium was packed with students, activists, professors. She walked on stage wearing a plain black suit. No makeup. No glamour, just presence. She looked out over the crowd, then into the cameras broadcasting live. I didn't come here to be famous, she began. I didn't want to go viral. I didn't want to have to replay the worst moment of my life in front of millions of strangers. She paused. But I realized something. Silence doesn't protect us. It only protects the people who profit from our pain. She shared stories from other victims. The flight attendant who was fired after standing up for a passenger. The mother who was forced to prove her first-class ticket was real while her child cried beside her. She didn't just speak for herself. She spoke for them. Privilege isn't power until you use it for someone else. The room erupted in applause. But as Kennedy stepped off stage, Monica pulled her aside with a pale face. What's wrong? Kennedy asked. Someone just leaked the hearing witness list, Monica whispered, including the whistleblowers. Ava says 2 of them are backing out. 1 already got a threatening letter at home. Kennedy's chest tightened. They're trying to silence us. Again. Monica nodded. We need a plan. And right then, Kennedy had one. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. I'm not waiting for permission anymore. That night, Kennedy posted the full cache of internal emails, redacted only to protect private identities, on her personal blog with a message. If they want to come for me, let them. But they won't bury the truth. By morning, every major outlet had picked up the story. The Senate Judiciary Committee confirmed the hearing would still proceed. And for the first time, it wasn't just Kennedy walking into that room. It was a movement, one that refused to be silenced. And they weren't done yet. The morning of the Senate hearing arrived with a cold gray sky hanging over Washington, D.C. Security outside the Capitol was doubled. Reporters crowded every sidewalk. Protesters held up signs that read, "We stand with Kennedy," and "Justice at 30,000 feet." Inside, the tension was thick enough to slice. Kennedy Langford stepped into the building flanked by her father and Monica. Darius, usually calm and composed, kept his hand lightly on her back. His eyes scanned every movement. But Kennedy. She walked tall, no designer suit, no makeup team. Just her truth, and a folder filled with evidence no one could ignore anymore. The hearing room buzzed as cameras rolled. Senators filled the dais. Across from Kennedy sat a panel of Altura Air executives, including Reynolds, who now looked nothing like the smug man from the lounge. He looked cornered. The chairwoman of the committee, Senator Wallace, leaned into her mic. "Ms. Langford, thank you for being here. We understand this has not been easy." "Please, begin." Kennedy opened her folder, took a breath, and began. "I was dragged out of an airport lounge, in front of dozens of people, like I was a threat. I was 17. I had done nothing wrong except be in a space someone else thought I didn't belong." She paused. "But what happened to me is not rare. It's part of a system that assumes power means protection, and prejudice is just another policy." She handed over printed emails, photos, testimonials. The room went silent. Executives fidgeted. Senators whispered. Then came the real twist. 3 days ago, Kennedy said, a current employee of Altura Air gave me this. She held up a thumb drive. It contains audio recordings of private meetings where executives discussed suppressing incidents like mine, coaching employees to avoid lawsuits, and even profiling passengers based on last names and appearance. The audience gasped. The chairwoman motioned for a tech aide, who took the drive and began verifying its contents. One of the recordings was played out loud. A voice, clearly Reynolds's, said, "She's just some rich kid playing victim. Drag her out and make it clear. This airline doesn't cater to trouble." Darius sat frozen, jaw clenched. Kennedy looked across the room directly at Reynolds. "You didn't just humiliate me. You tried to erase me, and when that failed, you went after my father. But the thing you never understood is that I didn't need him to fight my battle. I was already winning." The silence was deafening, until one senator leaned forward and said, "Mr. Reynolds, would you like to respond?" Reynolds stammered. "That recording was taken out of context. We were discussing hypothetical situations and—" "No," Kennedy interrupted. "You were discussing how to cover up discrimination, and now the country hears it." By the end of the hearing, Altura's stock had dropped 17%. The board announced Reynolds's immediate resignation. 2 other executives were placed under investigation. A federal inquiry into discriminatory practices in the airline industry was officially launched. Outside the building, the crowd was electric. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Kennedy stood at the top of the steps, flanked by her father, who placed a proud hand on her shoulder. "I didn't expect any of this," she told the crowd. "I didn't ask for fame or headlines. I just asked for dignity. And if we have to fight for that, then let's fight. Not just for me, but for every person who's ever been told they don't belong." The applause roared. A week later, Kennedy returned to New York and walked through the same airport where everything had started. This time she wasn't stopped. A black TSA agent gave her a quiet nod. A janitor smiled. A mother nudged her daughter to wave. Monica ran to meet her at baggage claim. "Did you hear?" she asked breathlessly. "The FAA just issued a new policy for bias training. Every major airline has to comply." Kennedy smiled. "That's a start." They walked out into the sunlight, the noise of the city alive around them. For the first time in weeks, Kennedy felt the weight lift. Just a little. Her phone buzzed. A new message from Ava. "They're listening now." "Keep going." She looked at Monica. "You ready for round 2? Monica grinned. "I was born ready." And as they stepped into the street, a helicopter buzzed overhead, Langford Industries insignia glowing on its side. The same one that had once made the world stop and look. Now the world was listening, because when one voice rises, others rise too. And when justice finally lands, it doesn't need permission. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. These are more than just stories. They're reminders that change starts when we speak up. Join us as we shine a light on the unseen, the unheard, and the unstoppable.